Here is a comprehensive, extended script written in native, high-quality narrative English. I have expanded on the psychological tension, the technical details of the equipment, the historical context mentioned in the source video, like the Grenada and Afghanistan incidents, and the political aftermath. This script is designed to be spoken at a measured, storytelling pace, like a documentary, and should exceed the 10-minute mark, with a word count tailored for deep engagement. Video title: The North Korean Ghost Mission: How SEAL Team 6's secret raid turned into a disaster. Script body: the ocean was black, indistinguishable from the night sky. The temperature of the water was freezing, literally cold enough to kill an unprotected human in minutes. But the men moving through the surf weren't unprotected, and they certainly weren't ordinary men. They were the Red Squadron of SEAL Team 6, the absolute tip of the American military spear. The same unit that had raided Abbottabad and killed Osama bin Laden. It was early 2019. On the surface, the world was watching a diplomatic spectacle. President Donald Trump and North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un were trading letters and preparing for historic summits. There was talk of peace, of denuclearization, of a new era. But beneath the surface, a shadow war was raging. Tonight, these operators were miles inside North Korean territorial waters, crawling onto a rocky shoreline that officially, they were never near. Their mission was straight out of a Cold War thriller: infiltrate the most locked-down country on Earth, sneak past its coastal defenses, and physically plant a high-tech listening device that would allow the NSA to intercept the private communications of the Supreme Leader himself. If they pulled it off, the United States would have an ear inside Kim Jong Un's inner circle. If they failed, or if they were captured, it wouldn't just be a tactical defeat. It would be an international catastrophe that could derail peace, talks, trigger a hostage crisis, or worse, spark a nuclear exchange with a volatile regime. What followed was a sequence of events that has never been officially acknowledged by the White House or the Pentagon. It is a story of technological hubris, bad luck, and a split-second decision that left civilians dead and forced a nuclear submarine to make a terrifying escape. This is the story of the mission that never happened. To understand why the United States would risk such a catastrophic escalation, we have to look at the intelligence landscape of the time. For the CIA and the NSA, North Korea has always been the black hole. It is an intelligence gap like no other. There is no internet infrastructure to easily hack, no dissident network to recruit spies from, and the inner circle of the Kim regime is impenetrable. When Donald Trump took office, the need to understand Kim Jong Un became an obsession. The North Korean leader was unpredictable. He was rapidly expanding his nuclear arsenal, estimated at over 50 warheads, with ICBMs capable of striking the U.S. mainland. Yet, he was also writing love letters to President Trump. American strategists were flying blind. They had no idea if Kim was serious about peace or just buying time to build more bombs. That's when the solution was proposed. A new piece of technology, a specialized bugging device, had been developed. It was capable of penetrating the shielded communications of the North Korean command. But this wasn't a virus you could email. It was hardware. It had to be placed by hand. The risk was astronomical. Military commanders knew that a covert entry into North Korea was technically an act of war. Under normal circumstances, the risk versus reward calculation would have killed this operation in the planning room. But these were not normal circumstances. The mission was briefed directly to the president, and Donald Trump gave the green light. The plan was complex, relying on the most advanced maritime technology in the U.S. arsenal. It began with a nuclear-powered attack submarine, a leviathan of the deep, moving silently into position off the North Korean coast. But a sub that size couldn't get close enough to the beach without being detected by sonar. For the final leg, the Navy deployed the SDVs, SEAL Delivery Vehicles. These are essentially mini submarines, about the size of a killer whale. But unlike a pressurized sub where you sit comfortably inside, the SDV is wet. The SEALs ride inside it, flooded with water, breathing through scuba gear, exposed to the freezing temperatures for hours. It requires a level of physical endurance that is almost superhuman. However, despite the cutting-edge tech, the team was entering the mission with a severe handicap. In modern warfare, U.S. forces are addicted to drone coverage. Usually, a Predator drone or a Global Hawk is loitering above, sending high-definition, real-time video to the operators. They can see around corners. They can see threats coming miles away. In North Korea, that was impossible. The country's air defense network is dense and paranoid. A drone would be spotted instantly. So, SEAL Team 6 was going in blind. They were relying on satellite imagery that was hours, sometimes days old. Once the mini-subs detached from the mothership, they were in a total communications blackout. They couldn't radio for help. They couldn't ask for updates. They were ghosting into enemy territory with nothing but their training and their instincts. As the mission commenced, the first phase seemed to go according to plan. The massive nuclear submarine held its position deep offshore. The two mini-subs launched and began their long, cold transit through the shallows. The target was a desolate stretch of coastline. Intelligence reports, based on weeks of satellite observation, showed that this area was empty at night. No patrols, no fishing boats, just rocks and sand. But as the famous military adage goes, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, or in this case, first contact with Murphy's Law. The unraveling of the mission began with three small, seemingly insignificant errors. The first error occurred when the mini-subs reached their parking spot on the seafloor, just a few hundred yards off the beach. The plan was for both vehicles to land facing the same direction to ensure a fast getaway. The first sub landed perfectly. The second sub, however, overshot its mark in the murky water. The pilot had to circle back and set it down. But in the confusion and darkness, he parked it facing the opposite direction. It was a minor deviation, but it meant that if they had to leave in a hurry, precious seconds would be wasted maneuvering the vessel. The team decided to press on. The SEALs exited the vehicles and began the swim to shore. They were wearing rebreathers, which emit no bubbles, and were armed with sterile weapons. Rifles with no serial numbers, loaded with untraceable ammunition. If they were killed or captured, there would be no forensic evidence linking them to the United States government. This led to the second error. As they surfaced near the beach, scanning the darkness with advanced night vision goggles, they saw nothing. The coast was clear, but there was a flaw in their technology. Their thermal optics were designed to pick up body heat. Floating nearby was a small wooden North Korean boat. The people on board were fishermen, likely poaching shellfish illegally at night. They were dressed in ragged, water-soaked winter clothes that had been chilled to the temperature of the freezing ocean. Because their wet clothing masked their body heat, the SEALs' thermal sensors looked right through them. The operators swam past the boat, completely unaware that they were being watched. The third error was the catalyst for disaster. Back at the mini-subs, the pilots realized the parking alignment was messy. One of the pilots decided to reposition his craft to make the boat extraction smoother. He engaged the electric motor to spin the sub. While these motors are designed to be silent, the physics of water displacement cannot be ignored. The sudden spin created a wash, a disturbance in the water, and a faint mechanical hum that traveled through the quiet night. On the surface, the North Korean fishermen heard it. Suddenly, the situation went from a stealth insertion to a potential firefight. Flashlights beamed from the fishing boat, sweeping across the black water. The beam of light danced over the waves, searching for the source of the noise. For the SEALs on the beach, time stopped. They were trapped on the shoreline of a hostile nuclear power. They saw the lights. They saw the boat turning towards the mini-subs. The operators were now facing the ultimate nightmare scenario. They had no way to communicate with the mini-subs underwater. They had no way to radio the nuclear submarine offshore. They didn't know if this boat was a simple fishing vessel or a disguised military patrol hunting for intruders. If the North Koreans radioed in a report of enemy frogmen, the entire coast would swarm with soldiers within minutes. The decision had to be made in a heartbeat. There was no chain of command to consult, no president on the line, just the team leader, standing in the wet sand, aiming his rifle. As the boat moved closer, one of the North Koreans fell or jumped into the water. It was chaos. The SEALs could not take the risk of discovery. The mission profile had strict rules of engagement, but the primary directive was survival and secrecy. The team leader squeezed the trigger. The silence of the night was broken by the thwack of suppressed gunfire. The other operators opened fire instantly. It was a precise, violent, and one-sided engagement. Within seconds, the 3 North Koreans on the boat were dead. The SEALs immediately swam to the vessel to confirm the kills and check for intelligence. They found no military uniforms, no radios, no weapons. These were civilians, just fishermen in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the horror of the mission didn't end with a shooting. The SEALs now had a grisly problem. 3 bodies floating in the water would eventually wash up on shore or be spotted by patrols at first light. A mysterious massacre of civilians with small arms would trigger a massive investigation by the regime. The SEALs had to make the bodies disappear. In a detail that highlights the brutal reality of covert ops, the team had to ensure the corpses would sink and stay sunk. The human body is buoyant, and decomposition creates gases that make it float. To prevent this, the operators used their combat knives to puncture the lungs and abdomens of the dead fishermen. It was a gruesome, intimate act of violence necessary to hide the evidence of their presence. The mission was aborted immediately. There would be no planting of the bug. The intelligence was lost. Now it was purely about escape. The team signaled an emergency extraction. This signal forced the massive nuclear mothership to do something incredibly dangerous. It had to move into shallow, littoral waters to pick them up quickly. If a North Korean diesel submarine or a coastal sonar station had picked up the acoustic signature of a U.S. nuclear sub that close to their shore, it could have been interpreted as the prelude to a nuclear first strike. Miraculously, they slipped away. The SEALs and the mini-subs were recovered, and the submarine vanished into the deep Pacific waters before the North Korean military could scramble a response. In the days that followed, satellite reconnaissance showed a massive spike in North Korean military activity in the area. They knew something had happened, but they didn't know what. The regime never publicly acknowledged the incident, likely because admitting that U.S. commandos had penetrated their defenses undetected would be a humiliating sign of weakness for Kim Jong Un. The political fallout in Washington was silent but severe. The Hanoi summit between Trump and Kim took place shortly after, but it collapsed without a deal. The North Koreans became more guarded, more hostile. They ramped up their missile testing program, breaking previous records for launch frequency. Back in the Pentagon, the failure of the mission reignited a long-standing debate about the culture of SEAL Team 6. This unit is legendary for its heroism, but inside the military community, they have also garnered a reputation for being cowboys, risk-takers who sometimes push the envelope too far. Critics pointed to previous disasters that had been swept under the rug. They cited the 1983 invasion of Grenada, where SEALs insisted on a daytime airdrop in a storm, resulting in 4 operators drowning. They pointed to the 2010 rescue attempt of Linda Norgrove in Afghanistan, where SEAL Team 6 operators accidentally killed the hostage with a grenade and then initially failed to report it accurately to their superiors. The North Korea raid was seen by some top brass as another example of this hubris, a mission that was too complex, relied too heavily on technology that failed, and lacked the necessary contingency planning. Furthermore, a legal storm was brewing in the shadows. Under U.S. law, specifically Title 50, the president is required to notify the Gang of Eight, the top leaders of Congress, about significant covert actions. The Trump administration allegedly did not inform Congress about this operation, neither before it launched nor after it failed. This lack of oversight meant that a small group of people had authorized a mission that risked a full-scale war, with zero accountability to the legislative branch. When the Biden administration took over, an internal review was launched. The investigation confirmed the details of the raid and the killing of the civilians. However, the conclusion was that the SEALs acted within the rules of engagement. Faced with compromised secrecy, they neutralized the threat to save the team. The officers involved were not punished. In fact, many continued their careers and were promoted. Today, the mission remains a classified secret. The official records are buried in the deepest archives of the Navy and the CIA. But the legacy of that night lives on. It serves as a chilling reminder of the razor-thin line between a heroic success and a catastrophic failure. We often think of history as being shaped by great leaders and public treaties. But sometimes, the fate of the world rests in the hands of a few men, shivering in the freezing dark, waiting for a fishing boat to turn away. In 2019, on a lonely beach in North Korea, luck ran out, and 3 fishermen paid the price for a geopolitical gamble that yielded nothing but silence. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the shadows of modern warfare, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We dig up the stories they don't want you to know. Let me know in the comments. Do you think the potential intelligence was worth the risk of World War III? I'll see you in the next video.